There are 76 hospitals in the province of Saskatchewan, and according to the latest statistics, there are a grand total of 33 people in the entire province, out of a population of nearly 1.2 million, 33 people who are in intensive care from the coronavirus. So one person for every 2 hospitals in a province physically larger than France. I'm not trivializing even a single death, but I'm pointing out that it is not a crisis by any normal measure. Like the rest of Canada, it's overwhelmingly a problem for the very old and very sick. Again, their lives have value. My point is that it is a disease that is focused on people in their 80s and 90s who have other health problems. So why are young, healthy people being locked up? It's the same story across Canada and indeed across much of the Western world. Now, as you know, we have helped lots of individual citizens who have received outrageous tickets and fines from the lockdown. In the name of the pandemic, they've been given these abusive treatments. Like in the Saskatchewan city of Prince Albert, where the local mayor has had a long-running vendetta against a particular church for years. And so he used the pandemic as an excuse to give the church the largest fine in Canada, $14,000. He hates that church, and he's using the pandemic as an excuse to smash it.
How did the fines come down? How did you find out that you were levied some fines? You had an evangelist, Ian Lavallee. He received a $2,800 fine plus a victim surcharge. And your ministry received what I think so far is the largest fine issued in the country for the coronavirus and breaking the regulations of a municipality is $14,000 plus a victim surcharge, or 10, with 10 plus the victims.
Yeah. So yeah, I was contacted by Peter Ross from the from the health authority. Said he wanted to talk to me, and I wouldn't, even if he said I've got something for you. I think he did say that anyways, but he didn't tell me he was going to give me a fine. But yeah, 2 weeks ago, he contacted me, and so I met him at my place of quarantining, and out at the farm, and he basically gave me the ticket.
In a way, how the mayor is using the pandemic to go after his rivals, that's a microcosm of the whole thing. There is a problem with COVID-19. It is a real problem. But by declaring a total emergency in the country and putting everyone into crisis mode, authorities now have powers to do a lot of things that are completely unrelated to the actual problem. And they're simply using these emergency powers to do all sorts of things that would never be acceptable in normal times in a free society. And now we're coming up on a full year of this. So much for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, eh? So we've helped individual people in Saskatchewan and all around Canada with our Fight the Fines project. We crowdfund lawyers to defend them, but that's reactive, that's defensive. It doesn't actually solve the problem. It's like whack-a-mole. The government will just find more people and just bring in more lockdown rules. It won't end, will it? Politicians love it too much. I want to tell you about something we're doing to change that. See, we booked a town hall meeting in Regina, Saskatchewan for last May of 2020. It was our friend Patrick Moore, the co-founder of Greenpeace. He had been invited by the city of Regina to give a speech at a conference for the city, and then censors, deplatformers, cancel culture types, they jumped in and bullied the city into banning him. Now that's outrageous and unfair. So I called up Dr. Moore and I said, don't cancel your trip to Regina. I'll rent a big hall in town and we'll hold your speech anyways, that same night as planned. And we'll keep the ticket prices really low and we'll make it a great night, get as many people out as possible. And we did this and it worked amazing. And well over 1,000 people signed up, far more than the original conference. We were making lemons into lemonade. He was banned, but we re-platformed him. It was going to be great. and that was scheduled for May of 2020. Well, of course, the pandemic came in March, and no one knew just how bad it was going to be in those early days. So when the giant auditorium we had booked, called the Connexus Arts Center, told us we had to postpone the event, we obviously agreed. And most of our ticket buyers, our would-be audience, agreed too. No one really knew what was going on. That was in the early days. Would we even survive the calamity? Was this the new Ebola? No one knew back then. Well, within a few months, we pretty much knew. You're going to be fine, statistically speaking, if you're a healthy person under 70. If it makes you feel better, wear a mask or use hand sanitizer or whatever. But we're going to be okay as a community, as a country. If you're very old and very sick, take special precautions. But we're going to get through this thing as a country. So we asked the theater to reschedule the event for later in 2020, and they did. But the province hadn't changed their rules banning indoor gatherings. They only allowed a tiny number of people, and not for the purposes we had in mind, even though the Connexus Art Center's main auditorium could hold over 2,200 people, they wouldn't let us have anyone in there. So we rescheduled it again, and each time some ticket buyers asked for refunds, which is fair, and we gave it to them. But as our audience got smaller, well, guess what? We could actually socially distance inside that giant theater. So individual families could sit far apart from each other in that main theater, certainly farther apart than they would in a Walmart or a Costco or on an airplane. But the province just refused to update its original ban on indoor events like theaters. Even though this wasn't like a rock concert or something like that, it was a political town hall meeting, one that had already been banned by the city. So this was very important. And I'm not saying that music concerts and other things like that aren't important too. But legally speaking, constitutionally speaking, as part of our democracy, political meetings, the freedom to assemble and speak and to listen to Professor Moore, those are given a very high level of protection. Those are actually called fundamental freedoms. You can look them up in Section 2 of our Charter of Rights. I think everyone has the right to meet and assemble for whatever reason. That's my personal opinion. But political speech about the problems of public life after a professor, Dr. Moore, had been censored and banned, well, that's the most protected speech in our Constitution. So we wrote a polite letter to the health minister and to the justice minister of Saskatchewan. We said, look, we understand the need for public health, but we can do this. Let me quote. Given the large size of the main Connexus Theatre, it is possible to hold the event with all current ticket holders attending while maintaining social distancing between family bubbles. Most ticket holders are couples or groups of 4, and based on our clients' experience, it would be possible for every cluster of people to sit 6 feet away from the next cluster. Certainly, seating would allow greater separation than is currently permitted on airplanes within the province of Saskatchewan, where masks are required, but there is no social distancing. Beyond this, Rebel plans to take other precautions, including providing multiple hand sanitizer stations in the lobby, providing a free mask to every attendee, screening all guests with a portable infrared thermometer, adjusting the reception and dinner events accordingly. Rebel News is also prepared to take any other reasonable precaution that the government of Saskatchewan may require to allow this event to proceed. You can see that letter in full on our website, opensaskatchewan.com. So it was a friendly letter, constructive, wouldn't you say? And we pointed out that it's frankly illegal for a government to just ban political gatherings. There is no pandemic exception in the Charter of Rights. There just isn't. Let me read a little bit more from the letter. Dr. Moore's speech is an important public policy event. His ability to speak freely and the opportunity for attendees to assemble and associate is a constitutionally protected right. The event came into being to counteract what Rebel News identified as a troubling act of censorship and deplatforming. It has been delayed once to accommodate public health concerns, but with the pandemic being under control in Regina, with not one active case being confirmed, whatever justification may have existed to prohibit events similar to this can no longer reasonably be said to exist. With flights and movies being approved activities in the province, there simply isn't any reasonable justification for a continued ban on this event. Despite this, the government has to date refused to relax its lockdown restrictions. Now, there are a handful of cases in the province again, but back then, the government had none, and they still wrote back and said, no compromise, no timeline for opening up, no recognition that we know more about the virus now than a year ago, and basically protect the long-term care centers, protect the seniors' homes, but young people just are less likely to get this disease and are less likely to be affected by it. No one under 20 in Saskatchewan has died from this disease, for example. There's different degrees of risk. We didn't know that a year ago. There's no understanding that there must be a balance between the public health goals and other societal goals, including our fundamental freedoms. So we decided to challenge this ban on gatherings with a constitutional challenge. We're suing the government of Saskatchewan. We have standing against Rebel News. We have the right to organize, the right to assemble and associate. We signed a contract with the Connexus Arts Centre. Dr. Moore has the right to speak. He has agreed to join the lawsuit too as a plaintiff, and our paying customers have the right to hear. They have the right to listen. One of our ticket buying guests, Leo Gamon, has agreed to be a plaintiff too. And last week, we filed the lawsuit in Saskatchewan. You can see that on the website opensaskatchewan.com too. The lawsuit's only 10 pages long. We've also filed affidavits from me, from Dr. Moore, and from Leo, explaining how our rights have been violated. I'd encourage you to go to opensaskatchewan.com to read them in full. I think they're interesting. There's some legalese in them, but it's not that bad. It's a serious lawsuit filed by serious lawyers who know their constitutional law, but I believe that the documents are accessible to anyone who just thinks about freedom. Let me quote a little bit from the lawsuit. So I told you who the plaintiffs are. Well, here's who we're suing. The respondent is Her Majesty the Queen in Right of Saskatchewan, as represented by the Attorney General of Saskatchewan and the Saskatchewan Minister of Health. The applicants seek judicial review and challenge the constitutional validity of the public health orders issued by Dr. Saqib Sahab, most recently dated December 14, 2020, or any subsequent or substantially similar order, the PHO. So PHO stands for Public Health Orders, which is the most recent of a number of orders previously issued under the Public Health Act. And here's what we're asking for. Remedy, that's what you call it. The public health order is ultra-virus, the PHA, so it's outside the powers of the government under the Public Health Act, and an unjustifiable violation of the fundamental freedoms of expression, assembly, and association, as well as freedom of the press. As a result, the applicants seek an order or declaration pursuant to Section 52 of the Charter that the public health orders is unconstitutional for infringing on Sections 2B, 2C, and 2D of the Charter, is not justified under Section 1 of the Charter, and is therefore of no force or effect. So you got to go a little slowly as you read this, but I think it's clear, isn't it? I'll read a little more. Further, or in the alternative, such remedy or remedies pursuant to Section 24 of the Charter that this Honourable Court considers appropriate and just in the circumstances, including damages suffered by the applicant due to the postponement or cancellation of the CAC event. C, a declaration that the public health order is unconstitutional for being inconsistent with and contrary to Section 1E of the Bill of Rights, and as such is of no force or effect. D, an order or declaration that public health order is invalid, unlawful, and ultra-virus the Public Health Act, and therefore of no force or effect. So we're both referencing Trudeau's Charter of Rights and Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights. That's a good Saskatchewan boy. And here's the grounds we're suing on. The grounds for the application, 8, the applicants assert that the public health order is improper and ultra-virus the authority granted to the Ministry of Health pursuant to the Public Health Act, as the Ministry of Health does not or cannot believe on reasonable grounds in the prerequisites for issuing health orders prescribed in Section 45 of the Public Health Act. Specifically, a serious public health threat does not exist in Saskatchewan, and B, the restrictions set out in the Public Health Act are overly restrictive and are not necessary to eliminate the risk to health presented by COVID-19 in Saskatchewan. I know I'm getting in the weeds a bit and there's some jargon here, but But I want to read the next couple of paragraphs to you, okay? And then that's it. I won't read anymore. You can read the whole thing at opensaskatchewan.com, because what I'm about to read is how judges balance fundamental freedoms in Canada with other goals that are also important, like public health. So you got to balance these things. This isn't the first time a law has been challenged under the Constitution, under the Charter of Rights. It's been on the books for almost 40 years. And over the years, courts have developed a test. It's called the Oakes test, named after a famous case. And it guides governments and courts about how to carefully balance, especially when they're violating our freedoms. I mean, no one would deny our freedoms are being violated. They would say it's justified. Well, let me read this part. I think this is the heart of the lawsuit. Take a look. In addition, the public health order unjustifiably infringes upon fundamental freedoms protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Charter, Part 1 of the Constitution Act, and to that extent is of no force and effect. Specifically, A, the public health order unjustifiably and unreasonably has the effect or incidental purpose of restricting expressive activity, causing a chilling effect on expression and activism, and impairs the ability of the applicants in seeking or attaining the truth, participating in social and political decision-making, and achieving self-fulfillment, contrary to Section 2B of the Charter for freedom of expression. B, public health order unjustifiably and unreasonably prevents the media from producing and publishing news and creates unconstitutional obstacles to media activities, contrary to Section 2B of the Charter for freedom of the press. C, public health order unjustifiably and unreasonably impairs the right to gather and engage in public life, contrary to Section 2C of the Charter for the freedom of assembly. And D, the public health order unjustifiably and unreasonably impairs the right to join together for common goals, contrary to Section 2D of the Charter for freedom of association. The public health order is not rationally connected to the legislative purpose, does not minimally impair fundamental rights, fundamental freedoms protected by the Charter, and is not a proportionate response to the public health situation in Saskatchewan. Therefore, the public health order is not reasonable or justifiable and is not saved by Section 1 of the Charter. I'm almost done. Stay with me, folks. Finally, the public health order also unjustifiably infringes upon the freedoms of assembly and association as protected by Section 1E of the Canadian Bill of Rights. That's Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights. Okay, sorry, that's a lot there, but those phrases I just read through there and those terms like unjustifiable, unreasonable, not rationally connected, not proportionate, those are the key words from the Oakes test. That's how the government has to be when infringing on a freedom. They actually do have the power to infringe on your freedom if it's minimal, the least possible, if it's rationally connected to their legislative purpose. They have all these checks and balances on them. They have to be the gentlest they can be. They have to be reasonable. They have to be able to justify it. They can't simply say, for example, that even a huge auditorium like the Connexus Arts Centre can't have more than a handful of people in it for a political gathering. That's just not how our freedoms work. You have to justify every single infringement and prove it's proportionate and prove it's rationally connected to your goal and prove it's minimally impairing. You have to do that or you're going to fail. That's the law. And you know what? We know a lot more about the virus now than we did a year ago. It's simply unacceptable to have a permanent ban on political gatherings and speeches just because the politicians are scared. The laws in Saskatchewan do not allow political gatherings at all right now. That's just not how democracies work. It's just not. And so we made the decision that we have to do more than just fight individual tickets and fines. We have to be proactive. We have to work to open all of Saskatchewan. And if the politicians ignore us, as they've been ignoring us, well, we have to go to court. I'm confident in our lawyers. They are experienced, they support freedom, and they're excellent on constitutional matters. You tell me. I'd like you to read this document. Go to opensaskatchewan.com yourself and read the lawsuit and the affidavits. And if you can help us, well, please do. I don't want to tell you exactly how much we've spent on this lawsuit so far, but it's safe to say it'll cost us between $100,000 and $150,000 for sure, or even more by the time we're done. Obviously, we're not doing this for the money. Our Patrick Moore's speaking event wasn't about making money either. It was about stopping the censorship of an intellectual and a scholar and an author at the hands of a cancel culture mob. Well, we beat that cancel culture mob by having our event, but now we don't seem to be able to beat the public health lockdown. So we have to go to court, not just for ourselves and our event, but for all Saskatchewan people. It's just that we have standing there because we are personally affected. It was our event. We were gathering. We wanted to speak. We wanted to meet. If you are from Saskatchewan, or if you're from anywhere else that wants to see these limits on our freedoms lifted, please read the lawsuit at opensaskatchewan.com. And if you can, please consider contributing to our crowdfunding campaign to pay for our constitutional lawyers. I know I ask for help for our lawyers a lot, but there is so much to do, and I think we have to do it in the courts because we see no courage amongst politicians. We defend individual Saskatchewanians right now. We do that, but it's time to free everyone in the province, not just a handful of people. And hopefully, if we are successful, it will inspire people across Canada to take their freedoms back. Thanks for your support. Now let's go open Saskatchewan. We filed a constitutional challenge to Saskatchewan's lockdown. You can read our lawsuit and help us crowdfund the lawyers by going to opensaskatchewan.com.